Well, good evening, everybody. I'm Jenny Marcelise, and I get the privilege of doing the talk on Generation Alpha. Not that I'm in that generation, I wish I was, but we're going to talk about them tonight. So we wanted to give you a little clip of their mindset of the church before we get started tonight. So watch this.
Like the 90s, 100.
17.
70?
43.
56? I don't know.
56.
50.
50?
Yeah.
50.
They should come here to teach.
Yeah,
Yeah, why?
very important. Because they're just like anyone else who's any other age. Yes.
Why?
Because they could be like your grandparents.
Yeah,
Why's that?
because they can learn about God when they're older and stay connected.
Because we're all the same and we all need to learn about the gospel.
Yeah,
Why do you think you're important in church?
because sometimes I help people when they're sad, or just encourage them to do stuff.
Because I'm a kid.
Because you're a kid.
Yeah.
So you think kids are important in church?
Yeah.
Should everybody come to church? Why?
So they can learn stuff.
Yeah,
Why's that?
so they can get connected to God.
Because I believe everyone should learn in Jesus.
Yes, because then they can learn about Jesus and know that he died for our sins and stuff.
So I was very encouraged by that they think old people should be in church and young people should be in church, but I wasn't encouraged that I'm considered old because I'm over 50. But I'm really excited that you guys are here tonight and looking forward to sharing some of the things that I've learned. Honestly, I know a lot about kids, but I had never really looked at it from a generational standpoint, from generations, and so kind of dove in and felt like, wow, this is really neat. I used a few resources that I tried to put out on the table. They're also at the back of your little packet, because I'm going to refer to some of them, because a lot of this comes from other people, not just from me. What was really interesting to me was to find out how much generations play a role in leadership. And so learning about different generations and how they think really plays a role in leadership. So I'm hoping that this helps you, whether you're a parent, a grandparent, you own a company, you work with other people. Hopefully you'll be able to understand a little bit about the youngest members of our society. And that is Generation Alpha, and that is anybody born after the year 2013. So anybody 10 or less is who we're going to be talking about tonight. So I like this first quote to kind of get our brains wrapped around something. It's when you were born is as important as where you were born. So if you were born in Italy, the way your life would look would be very different than if you were born in Cuba or you were born in the United States. It's the same depending on when you were born. And if you think about traveling to another country, if tomorrow you were going to get on a plane and you were going to go to France, you would know that when you got there, the people that you would interact with would be different than you. And maybe you would have done a little research. You might have learned a little bit of French words, especially where is the bathroom. You would have studied some different things about them so that you were prepared to experience everything in France that it has to offer you. Well, the same is true about generations. You almost have to think about when you were born really changes your words, how you think about things, and how the world works. And so sometimes, I think especially for those of us who are the older end of this, we don't get where these kids are and we think they should be different. They shouldn't, because they grew up in a very different time than we did. So I wanted to see tonight, what do you know ahead of time about Generation Alpha? So I'm going to ask you a couple questions and see if anybody can answer. So the first one is, does anybody know what a squishmallow is? Oh, some of you do. What is it? What is a squishmallow? Shout it out. It's a stuffed animal, and it's an overpriced stuffed animal. And they're very big and they're very squishy. So they're a squishmallow. Does anybody know what is Bluey? What's Bluey? Shout it out. It's a cartoon. Somebody said a TV show. It is not a TV show. It is on streaming services. It is on Disney and Prime. But Bluey is an Australian sheepdog who she and her sister Bingo and their family go all through kinds of adventures. Does anybody know what is Shimmer and Shine? What's Shimmer and Shine? There are two little cartoons. They're actually two little genies who are friends with a little girl named Leah, and they help Leah go through all kinds of problems and situations. It was funny because I asked Pastor Brandon about all these, and he knew all of them. And I said, well, you do have a 4-year-old, and you used to be in student ministries. But so then I asked him if he knew what these words meant. So I'm going to give you a couple words, and I want to see if you know what these words mean. The first one is sus. How many of you raise your hand if you know what that is? Okay, a few of you. Bussin'. Okay, a few less. Some of you are like, the bus that I took in to work this morning. Now, sleigh. Okay, about the same. And drip. All right, a few. Now, what was really funny that Pastor Brandon told me is these were words that were very popular with his teenagers 4 or 5 years ago. And these have now come down to our children. So what in the world do they mean? Sus is an abbreviation for suspicious. So if they don't believe something, they might say that that's sus. Bussin' means something is really good to eat. So moms, grandmoms, if you hear that was bussin' over your meal, that is a really good compliment. The word slay, like you slay something, that meant you did really well at it. And then drip, and that's a compliment. So you might be like, please don't say I'm drip. They're saying you look really cool. And so those are things that you might hear. So obviously there's a few different words. When I was teaching on Sunday, I asked the kids, is there anything that I should tell the parents about kids today? And one of the comments was, they should know what our words mean. And so I said, okay, and then I looked at them and I said, well, how do they know what your words mean? Well, they should just know. I said, well, they don't. I said, so how could they know what the words mean? And we kind of talked it out, and we came to the end of, you should tell them. And so that might just be one of those things that you ask someone 10 and under periodically, hey, what are the new words? You might not think about doing that, but it's a really good thing to do. And it also gives you a gauge of what you're hearing or seeing if it matters. So I want to show you this quote, and I want to see if anybody agrees with this. So let me read you this quote. Children now love luxury. They have bad manners and contempt for authority. They show disrespect for their elders and love chatter in place of exercise. Children now are tyrants, not the servants of their household. They no longer rise when elders enter the room. They contradict their parents, chatter before company, gobble up dainties at the table, cross their legs, and tyrannize their teachers. Anybody think that would be a quote that you might be able to say about today's youth? Raise your hand if you agree that you could say that. All right, anybody want to guess when this quote was made? 1913? Any other guesses? It was actually Socrates made this quote 2,400 years ago. And so has there always been a discrepancy between older people and younger people? The answer is yes. Now, is it a little different today? Yes. And we call that a generational gap. So I want to tell you what a generational gap is. It's a substantial divide in politics, taste, morals, and virtually everything else between the young and the old, with the old including everyone over 30. This was coined by John Poppy, the editor of Look magazine in 1960. And so there's always been this generation gap between older and younger. But today, that generation gap is so much wider than it used to be. Why? Any guesses why the gap is bigger today than it used to be? Okay, internet, what else? You gotta yell it out loud. Anybody else have any guesses why it's bigger? Okay, technology, the internet, that's one of the reasons. So there's really about 5 reasons why the gap has widened so much. The first is the rapid change in culture. Culture has changed very rapidly in the past century. And you think back, it was very rural, everybody was together, and then not just technology, but improvements, industry has changed so much, and so those rapid changes have really affected the gap between the old and the young. The second one is an increase in life expectancy. Because people are living longer, the gap is getting wider. I went to my great-niece's birthday party 2 weeks ago, and there were 5 generations at that birthday party. My mother-in-law is in her 80s. My husband and his brother and sister are baby boomers. I'm a Gen X. My niece is a millennial, and then her 2 kids are alphas. And so you went from 86 in that room to 5. And so that hasn't happened for a long time because people are living longer, the gap is wider. Economics. Economics have shifted so much over the years that plays a big role in the gap because the rise and fall of money affects parents, which then affects children. And so that gap is a lot bigger because there's been a lot of those over the past century. And then obviously, technology and media have really greatly increased it. With technology and media, we have a lot of new information, we have a lot of new perspectives, and a lot of new experiences that kids didn't used to have. I mean, if you think about it, if you're a boomer, how many shows were there on TV that showed you places around the world? Can you think of any? If you are a millennial, can you think of a show that you see that has people around the world? A little bit more. You can go on Disney Plus and you can find a show now about almost any country around the world. So the gap is widening because these young guys have access to so much more that we never had. And we really have gone from what we would consider a synthesized society, where we're all kind of together, to a very polarized society. These 2 examples really helped me kind of wrap my head around it. We started out with a 1-room schoolhouse. Who was in a 1-room schoolhouse? Everyone. So you have a teacher maybe who's in their 30s with 12th graders, 10th graders, 5-year-olds, and they're all working together with one another. What has happened now? If you look, where are we today? Kids are separated into grades, into buildings, into some schools are just for certain kinds of kids and certain things they want to study. We've gone from this synthesized, we're all kind of around the same thing, to completely different things. And so that plays a role in how we look at each other. A black and white TV. How many of you grew up and you watched a black and white show on Sunday night with the whole family around the show? Raise your hand if you did that. All right, what was your favorite show? Ed Sullivan Show? Okay, anybody else? Bonanza, there you go. So you have the whole family sharing an experience maybe once a week that you all watch the same thing. If you go into a home today, what would you most likely see? Would you see that? No, you would have mom's on her phone, dad's on his tablet, kids are in their room, each on their own iPad or iPhone, watching a television show that they picked for them from Disney's 800 different shows that they can pick from. You can see how that has spread us out and how we think differently. So when you think about that, relatability has to become intentional. If we don't do work, we are not going to get along, and we are not going to understand each other. I heard this, Tim Elmore is the man who does a ton of things with this, and one of his quotes was, "You have to seek to understand if you want to be understood." And so if you want kids today to understand you, you have to understand them. It's not going to work without that. If you want to lead people, you have to read people. And especially not just parents, but bosses. We were just talking, the tech team here, the worship team, has Xers, millennials, and Gen Z. And they're learning how to work together. And one of them said, I kind of understand their jokes, and I kind of understand their jokes. But they're working together, trying to understand each other. And so you really have to learn to do that. And I love that God knows this. None of this is a surprise to Jesus. Before the world began, he knew everything that was going to happen. And so into his word, he put the words that we were going to need to learn how to get along with one another. And so the Bible is filled with one another's. Do this to one another. And so I want to read Ephesians 4, verses 1 through 3. And this is Paul writing to the Ephesians, and he says, "Therefore, I, a prisoner for serving the Lord, beg you to lead a life worthy of your calling, for you have been called by God. Always be humble and gentle. Be patient with each other, making allowances for each other's faults because of your love. Make every effort to keep yourself united in the Spirit, binding yourself together for peace." And so what Paul is saying to us, what God is saying to us, is we have to make every effort to get along. If we're not going to make effort and we're not going to put intention into this, it is not going to happen magically, whether that's in your home, in your business, and especially in the church. We have to see everybody, the little guys in the nursery, the 8-year-olds running around, the teenagers, to the oldest person in our church, we're all the church. And so we all have to make every effort to get along. And so that's tough, especially when you learn a lot about Generation Alpha. So I want to share with you about 25 just real quick snippets about the world that kids live in. Now, obviously, these kids are the oldest one is about 10 years old, so we don't have a lot of data on them. These are what we see coming and what we've learned kind of so far. So we're just going to kind of go through, and these are in there. But they are on track to become the largest generation, the biggest generation we've ever had, but interestingly enough, not in the United States. Basically, that means we're not having as many kids as the rest of the world. The generation itself is supposed to be the largest, but not in America. They are most likely to be the most educated generation we've ever had. They are probably going to be the most materially endowed generation. They will have the most stuff of anyone. I don't know about you guys, but if you look in a 5-year-old's room today, most likely there's not enough room for their toys. They have just been given stuff. They are the most technologically immersed generation. Obviously, there's never been anybody who's going to be this immersed into technology. Because of that, there's some things we do know. The attention span of someone 10 and under, and really for a lot of Generation Z, is down to 8 seconds. And so when you don't have them listening to you for longer than a minute, you're like, they're gone. But that's the way the world is to them. If you watch any program on YouTube or television or whatever, the angle of the shot changes every 8 seconds because you want to keep the kids involved. It's always a different place. It's from a different viewpoint. Now, some of you who are older, you're like, slow down. But these kids are taught by what they watch, something should be changing and happening all the time. And so it does explain why they can't sit still for very long. Their empathy level compared to like when you would gauge people's empathy, which is, caring about other people, it is down 40% from previous generations. And it's all completely linked to technology. And what's really exciting to me is this isn't just information the church has. You're starting to see these things in all areas of life. And so we were just doing a thing we were going to post on our website about technology, and Miss Joanne literally pulled up like the Medical Association and a couple other non-religious organizations, and they're all saying the same thing. It's not just a church thing. They are also going 3 times more obesity in this generation than previous generations. The reason is they're sitting on a screen. They're not out running around, and so this young generation is going to be 3 times more obese than any other generation. And one other thing about your empathy level that I didn't say, some of that is because of what they play. So when you play a game and somebody dies in the game, and then 2 seconds later they get up and you get another life, you start to go, life doesn't matter as much because, you just get it in the next video game. And all the silly things they see on television or on videos, a lot of that can be manipulated, and they don't realize that. And so sometimes you think, why do these kids believe? They don't understand what they're seeing, and so they really aren't learning real life consequences because of what's on the television, what's on the TV. Tablet, sorry. And you can tell what generation I'm from because I say TV still. They are growing up in a world where they will have more virtual relationships than ever before. Alexa, Siri. One of the interesting things that are coming out right now is little kids are yelling and shaming Siri and Alexa. Alexa, you're so stupid. Why don't you do this? And they're learning to have literal virtual relationships instead of real relationships. Anxiety in the younger generation has been normalized. It is normal for a child to be anxious. It was not normal when I was growing up. I was never really that worried. I remember watching President Reagan get shot on TV, and I was scared. That's about the most that I remember from my childhood that was scary. These kids are seeing this every single day. In 2019, there were 419 mass shootings. More shootings in that year than the days of the year. Imagine an 8-year-old having to deal with that. And they do have to deal with it because now it's there for them to see. They have what's called FOMO and FOMO. They have a fear of missing out of everything that's going on around them, and they have a fear of messing up. If you think about it, when you were growing up, most of you, if you went to lunch and you dropped your cafeteria tray in the lunch line, how long were you embarrassed about that? You most likely would have forgotten it by the time the end of the day or the next class was over. Today, that was now captured on video. It's been put on social media. It can go viral, and millions of people can see your mess up. Isn't that a little scary? And so they're so scared about messing up. And when I asked the kids on Sunday, one of the things they wanted me to tell the adults was, please tell them, one little girl said to me, please tell them we really don't mean to make mistakes. We're trying really hard. And so understand these kids, they may not do certain things because they really are scared of messing up, because who knows where it could go to. Everything for this generation, Z and under, is organized. Sports are organized. School is organized. Everything has an organization to it for their lives. How many of you growing up, baseball was organized? How many of you just had pickup games outside. Anybody ever play in a pickup? You just had a pickup game with your neighborhood. I lived on a cul-de-sac. We loved having spur-of-the-moment kickball games. Kids don't have that. Everything is organized. And so some of this, as parents, when you're raising these kids and they're this age, stop and say, is that what I want for them? Children in this generation are most likely to spend their childhood without one biological parent. It's pretty much, when you look at where our world is, most of them are going to grow up in a one-parent household. They also, which is a good thing, they care about the world. Because they understand the world and they see the world, they care about it. I asked a little girl who was a little over 12, and I said, what's one of the biggest problems in the world? People need clean water. And I thought, when I was 12, I would have said, I want a new pair of shoes. I didn't think globally they do. The mental health of their millennial and Gen Z parents has always been a problem their whole life. And that's a lot for people. There's a lot of pressure on these two generations. That affects this generation. Because the people that they look to are anxious, scared. Do I think about things correctly? They're learning from that. They are more likely to favor relationships than tasks. Their loyalty isn't to an institution or a person, it's to an idea. It's not, I really followed, I'm trying to think of a great example. It's more to like, I believe in freedom for everybody. It's an idea, not a person, not an institution. And that was kind of how we went down the line. Their view of the future and growing up is very different. How many of you, when you were growing up, you were like, I want to get a good job, I want to go to work, have a family, maybe get this one job and work my way through the company? Anybody ever feel like that growing up? When asked, Generation Alpha, they see their future as gigs. And I didn't really think this is true. And I asked one that I knew, and I said, so what's your life going to look like? Well, I think the first thing I want to do is I want to be a homicide detective. I said, really? Well, it was from a show. Then after that, I would like to be a dancer. And then after that, I think I'll be a geography teacher. And it was very interesting to me because I read that and I thought, no. Like I thought all growing up, I want to be a teacher. That's all I wanted to do. I wanted to be a teacher. I was going to teach my whole life. That's not how they view the future. They view, I'm going to do a little bit of this, then a little bit of this, then a little bit of that. So if you're a boss and you are starting to hire some of these children, they are not going to look, I'm going to be at your company for the next 10 years, the next 15 years, and give you my loyalty. They're going to stay for a couple years, and then they're going to find the next thing. And usually that thing is something that they're passionate about or something they like to do. They will multitask. If I needed to study when I was in college, how many of you had like little cubbies you could go to where it was quiet and nobody was around and you could study? Anybody have that when they went to school? All right, a lot of you. Not today. They will multitask. They will have 3 things going on at the same time. They will be doing their homework, they'll be texting to 3 different friends, watching a video, and uploading something onto social media. It's the way their brain works. They will be doing 18 things at one time because they always think they have to do it. They will broadcast their every thought and emotion. How many of you are thankful when you were growing up and you were a teenager in college, you could not, in 2 seconds, post exactly what you were feeling? They can. And that's very hard because they just give full vent to their emotions and aren't learning how to keep that inside. They will have social contact at all times, but a lot of that will be online, so it's done in isolation. And they will enjoy external stimuli 24/7 at their fingertips. So, I feel bad. Okay, I can grab my phone. Oh, I can do this. I can look here. Oh, I need some music to get me running today. Let me put this song on. Oh, I'm having trouble figuring this out. Let me go to this. Imagine something externally all the time ready at your fingertips. It's a lot for them. And then because of that, they live in what we would call an accelerated complex culture. It's incredibly fast-paced. Kids today are living so much quicker. Their brains don't have any time to stop, any time to process. And then not only is it going faster, it's more complex. They have so much else to bring inside. And so it has affected them. But what I also want to point out is it has affected all of us, and we don't realize it. And so maybe about 10 years ago, I heard Tim Elmore talking on a thing on the radio, and he was talking about the IY generation. And he gave this kind of chart, and this chart really helped me understand a little bit more about why kids are the way they are. And it really is a lot of why these generations are the way they are. The first is life is full of speed. Think about how fast things work. How many of you, raise your hand, use dial-up internet? Raise your hand. Okay, remember that you've got mail and that sound, and you'd have to sit and wait for the sound. How many of you watched a television program that was only on once a week? Okay, I remember Little House on the Prairie, and I can't wait to find out next week what happens to Laura and her sister Mary. Never. It's you binge watch, and so boom, 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 boom. And so because life is so fast, it's full of speed, what they're learning is slow is bad. When something is slow and takes a long time, it's very frustrating, it's very bad to them. The second scene is convenient. Life is very full of conveniences today. So we are learning that hard is bad. Perfect example that I could think of is I keep seeing all these ads for HelloFresh. Oh, it's quick and easy, and everything comes to your door, and it's pre-cut, and you don't have to do any work. Everything is right there for you. And if you use it, please enjoy it. I'm not, saying HelloFresh is bad, but it's a very cool example of nobody wants to do anything hard. You mean I have to go to the store, I have to buy the vegetables, I have to cut the vegetables, I have to wait while the meal is prepared. They're learning hard is bad. It's a world of entertainment. You have entertainment at your fingertips. So what we learn is boring is bad. And what's really interesting is neuroscientists have said when your brain develops empathy and creativity is when you're bored. And so I was reading this and thinking about this, and what am I? I go to Walmart and I'm waiting in the line. What do? I grab my phone, I open it up. Oh, let's check social media. Let me check my email. And all of a sudden I went, ooh, I put the phone away and I waited in line. And my brain had to think. Even just for you guys, think about in your life, are you bored? You should be. There should be times in your life when you're bored, because then you get to think about other people, you get to think about situations. And I realized so much of the world, even just with TV, we're starting to see the same shows rerun and the new twists. And I look at things, I'm like, it doesn't feel like it's a very creative world anymore. Well, how can it be creative? We're not having any downtime. And so I would encourage you, if that's the only thing you gain from tonight, put some downtime in your life. Put your phone away, put whatever away, and let your brain work. We've also learned that nurturing, life is full of nurturing. And so kids are learning risk is bad. Now this one I have to watch how I say this. How many of you grew up in a car and you did not put a seatbelt on? Anybody ride in the back of a station wagon? Okay, anybody ride in the back of a pickup truck? It was one of the funnest things in the world, the back of my dad's pickup truck coming in from piano lessons, and he'd go around the bend and we'd go flying. Now, I am not pro all of that, but we have nurtured our children so much, they don't know how to take a risk. They have helmets, they have this, they have that, they have this, because we want them to be safe. We have to be really careful that there is some place in their lives where they're taking risks. Because you know what's developed when you take risks? Courage. You develop courage when you're doing something risky. Now, that does not mean you let your kids go crazy and, do all those kind of things. But just take a step back and say, am I protecting them so much that they're thinking any risk is bad? And then finally, life is full of entitlement. I want this. I should have the latest shoes. I should have the best seat. And so we've learned that labor is bad. I love hearing, well, you can just go to college for free. Really? It's just free? And so these kids are growing up, I deserve this. I deserve that. I don't have to work for it because I'm entitled to it. And so we really have to watch that. And you have to think about all of those things in just normal life, but they also translate into our spirituality. When do you learn some of the greatest lessons from Jesus? When you're waiting. When you step out and do something for him that's a little bit risky. When you he works slowly in our lives. And so we have to be very careful that we're helping these kids realize that slow, and some of those things aren't hard. And those things on the side, slow, hard, boring, risk, and labor, are some of the things that make the most mature people in the world. And we've taken all of this stuff out of their world that's going to develop them into competent, full of grit adults. But the other thing that these kids have that I don't think a lot of us had was they've been targeted. They are targeted by algorithms and by advertising, and they want them to think a certain way. There's an agenda that's put on these kids. So I wanted to share 2 examples with you that just broke my heart about this. The first one is an app right now called Roblox. It's not a bad app. It's kids from different places can play on it. It's the ultimate virtual universe that lets you create, share experiences with friends, and be anything you can imagine. Join millions of people and discover an infinite variety of immersive experiences created by a global community. That's right from there what this is. And so I look at that and I think you're getting all these, but they're thinking you can build anything you want. You don't have to work too hard. The other thing that's interesting with that, anybody can join it. And so anybody can join with 8-year-olds on Roblox, saying they're an 8-year-old. That's really tough. I saw someone get this gift for Christmas. It is a Barbie cutie reveal doll. And at first when I saw it, I thought, aw, that's really cute. And then the mother of the person who got it said, wouldn't it just be like Barbie to find a way to match Barbie and furries? And I stepped back and I looked at it. And what this doll does is you unbox this amazing experience, and underneath there are all these surprises. And underneath this wonderful little outfit is Barbie, dressed as some type of animal. And then you undo all this stuff about her, which we wonder why we start to think about little kids going, well, I need to reveal my inner self. You can put hot water or cold water on her face, and underneath is an animal face. And so a furry are individuals who are especially interested in anthropomorphic or cartoon animals. And they strongly identify with these animals and create personas of who they are. I don't know if you've ever seen a furry convention in Pittsburgh, but all these grown people come dressed as animals. And at first you look at that and you go, that's not that bad. But there is a lot attached to that that sets the stage for these kids going, oh, well, maybe my true self is hidden underneath who I am, and this is just, I need to reveal who I am. And so it's very tough. So, all that to say, how many of you are depressed? It's hard, and there's no, but what I love about God is he always has a plan. So what's the plan to help these kids that are so little and so vulnerable? God has a plan, and this is what it says in Psalm 78, 4-8, which was our verse when we built the kids' wing and the warehouse. It says, "We will not hide these truths from our children. We will tell the next generation about the glorious deeds of the Lord, about his power and his mighty wonder. For he issued his laws to Jacob. He gave his instructions to Israel. He commanded our ancestors to teach them to their children, so that the next generation might know them, even the children not yet born, and they in turn will teach their own children. So each generation should set its hope anew on God, not forgetting his glorious miracles and obeying his commands." God had a plan, and that is for those of us who are older, whether you're Generation Z or the whole way baby boomers or the silent generation before them. It is our job to feed into the next generation. And God knew that. And that's in families, and that's in the church. And so my question to you tonight is, are you going to be a bridge or a wall for these kids? Who can tell me what a bridge does? Connects what? Two sides. A bridge connects two different things. So you can be a bridge. You can connect to the other generations around you, and when you build a bridge, both sides can be crossed. So you can go from one side to the other. You can be a bridge. What does a wall do? It stops. It stops someone, and so it can stop. And so we can either be bridges or we can be walls. I went into Panera's about a month ago, and there was an older gentleman who was older than the baby boomers, and he was in there, and he goes to our church, and we talked just for a little bit, and he was having trouble paying for his coffee, so I bought his coffee. And so he just thanked me, and we were just talking. He goes, I like that church. I said, I'm so glad. I love Cornerstone too. He goes, but there is one thing that bugs me. And I said, what's that? He goes, they wear those ripped jeans on stage. He goes, not what's up with that. He goes, I don't like that. And he goes, I was taught we dress up for church. You give God your best. Now, I had a choice because I was taught you dress up for church. And I could have been a wall and looked at him and said, I so agree with you. Like, come on, people. Instead, I said to him, I want to tell you something. That is their best. To them, those ripped jeans and the nice blazer or whatever it is, that is their best. And he goes, really? I said, yeah. And then I looked at him and I said, I want to tell you, I know a lot of them, and they love Jesus. And he literally looked at me and he goes, really? And I went, yes, they do. And we went on. But it was interesting to me how we can jump in and build a wall, or we can bridge that gap. Kids today need someone to model this for them. They need someone to show them. I love this quote. Nothing beats a sermon they can see. They need to see you caring about them and you modeling Jesus. In the book, Faith for Exiles, Barna studies kids who grew up in the church and then what happened to them, how some left, how some stayed, they come every once in a while, and then how some are called what's called resilient Christians, who are living out their faith into their 20s and 30s. And so I want to show you this graph because I thought this was really interesting. If you look over at the resilient disciple, and it's in your thing, 88% of kids who grew up and who has stuck with the faith, the church is a place where I feel I belong. Compared to those who left Christianity, 5%. Do you know how much it matters to this young generation that they feel like this is a place where they belong? So when they run past you in the hall or they slam the door before you walk in, please be a bridge, not a wall. They need to know that. There is someone in my life who encourages me to grow spiritually. 85% of those who stuck with their faith said that, compared to 23%. I am connected to a community of Christians, 7% those who left the faith to 82% who stayed. Do you see how important it is to these generations that they feel accepted and loved at their church? And you can't see it because of the thing, but it says, when growing up, I had close personal friends who were adults from my church, parish, or faith community. It's 27% for those who left the church. It's 77% for those who stayed. And so when adults model and love the younger generation, it is one of the highest indicators that they will stay with their faith. And I think that's just amazing to me. And so those of you who are kids, keep your kids in church. Those of you who are older, love the kids who are in your church. And I love the fact that in that video, every one of those kids says, yes, I matter to this church. And so I can stand up here and say, thank you for doing what you're doing. The transfer of wisdom between generations is more important than ever. Unless we are intentional, young Christians will be raised by their devices and algorithms rather than by us. We have to be intentional. And then when older adults model deep ways of following Jesus, young people notice. And so you matter to this next generation. And so how can we reach them? What are some ways to reach them? It will look different. It will not be, I like this quote, it is a guide by their side, not a sage on the stage. They need people who will come alongside them and walk through this life with them, not lecture to them. And that is really important. So there's 4 that he said you have to be epic. And so this helped me remember it. Kids today need experiences. They learn from experiences. We have a little girl in her church who went and spent the weekend with her grandmother. The grandmother decided, I'm going to teach her how to bake a pie from scratch. So they took an afternoon and made a pie from scratch. From that, she went home, went to school, went to the library, found a cookbook, brought it home, said, Mom, can I make Dad a Valentine's dinner? Through all of that, and then they had wonderful conversations. The experience with her grandparents, teaching something that she didn't know how to do, talking about life together, then translated into life skills of conversation with her parent. Think, what can I do with them to help bring about these conversations to teach them something? And every one of you in here has skills that they don't know. Young kids today have no idea. You mean you can, I literally heard someone say, you can make a pie that you don't buy? Yes, you can. There's so many, and gentlemen, you can teach them to woodwork. You can, all those things that you knew how to do, you can teach it to them. They need to participate. You can't just talk to them. They would never be able to sit here and listen to what I'm doing. They need to participate. A great example, you have kids who are whining about they want more stuff at the stores. Sit them down with you and help them pay bills. Tell them, we have this much money, here are the bills, let's pay them, and help them see what it does. And so that at the end of the month, we've got all these bills to pay, and here's the money I have, so when we go to the store, we don't have that. And so I think that's a little bit of a mind switch. You have to include these kids into things, because if you don't, YouTube will. They'll find other places to figure things out if they can't go to you. image rich. They live with images, emojis. Half the time an emoji says 8 words instead of the words themselves. Why is that? They like pictures. And so think of pictures. The bridge and the wall. Did that help you understand it? That picture gets it in your brain. It is so much more for our little guys. They have to see that. And then opportunities to connect. They have to have times when they connect with people on purpose. And so here's just 7 real quick little guidelines I wanted to give you, things that you can do to connect with the younger generation. The first one is live what you believe and do what you say. One of the things the kids said to me on Sunday is, would you please tell them if they promised to do something that they would do it? And I thought, wow, isn't that from the heart of that child? And if as a parent or a grandparent or a teacher or the boss, you can't do it, tell them why. Sit them down and say, I'm so sorry I wasn't able to do what I promised, and here's why. And this means in every way. One of the Barna group who did that study on faith in exile, resilient disciples, one of the biggest things for the nomads, the one who walked away, were people who said one thing on Sunday and did totally opposite the rest of the week. If you want to talk to your kids about living for Jesus, you have to do it on Sunday, you have to do it on Monday, you have to do it on Tuesday. And if you're not going to live it out through the week, don't say on Sunday, come in and hello and wonderful and praise Jesus and this is wonderful. At least reflect where your heart is, because these kids see right through you. And you are turning them off of the gospel if you're saying one thing and doing another. And here's another one. If you want them to have less media, less technology, you have to. If you don't want them to be on their phone or on their tablet all the time, they have to see people who aren't on their tablet, who aren't on their phone. You have to help them deepen relationships. You have to be intentional about making time for real people-to-people relationships. Go for a walk. Join them for an event. Watch a sports game together and talk about it. Play cards. Play an actual board game. Doing things like that gives them a chance to build a relationship with a real person. And so think about, what can I do that is actual face-to-face interaction? You can also, just here at church, say hello in the halls. When you see anyone younger than you, talk to them. Say hi. And I love this, get down on their level. Because then they know they see you face-to-face, not looking up at you. Say hello to them, talk to them, mentor somebody. If there isn't somebody in your life that you are feeding into, think about ways that that can happen. And I always know when we do talks like this, I always remember sitting in talks like this going, dear Lord, how in the world am I going to do that? When do I have time to fit somebody else in my life to talk about life experiences? I need to look at my life and figure it out. Because if there's not time for interpersonal relationships in your life, something needs to go. And you have permission to not do it. If you need to say, oh, well, we're not going to do sports this thing because I need a once-a-week game night with my kids face-to-face, do it. Because just like these kids being immersed in this generation and pulled in by everything, we are too. And so we have to stop and say, if I can't do some of these things, what do I need to change? You all have something you can share. I loved, it says that older Christians can give wisdom to younger Christians. Younger Christians give energy and life to older Christians. When you start feeding into them, you know what else happens? They start feeding into you, and you can gain so much more. They need context for all the content. They can figure anything out on a tablet. You can look anything up. I had a mom come up to me and say, I was checking my child's tablet, and one of the Google questions was, what is a homosexual? Had that mom not been checking, that little boy's context of what that was would have all been what was targeted for the Google ad to come up. But because mom was checking, they then could say, I saw that you Googled that. Let's talk. Let's have that conversation, because they don't need you anymore. This is the first generation that does not need their parents for information. They can go to the tablet and find out anything that you could tell them. But what it doesn't give them is context. You give them that. We also have to help them develop emotional health. That is not ingrained in children in the culture that we're living in. Equations seem to help better than rules. And at first I was like, I do not like that statement. But what it is if it's an equation. If you do this, this is the result. If you do this, this is the result. Not the rule is, don't do this. And it helps them contextualize it a little bit better. So if you choose not to do your homework, your tablet's going away tomorrow. If you do your homework, you get to keep your tablet for tomorrow, or whatever it is. And I think about Deuteronomy, and the Lord says, he tells his people, if you obey me, these are the blessings that will come upon you. If you disobey me, these are the things that will happen. Help your kids think through it that way, as opposed to, here's the rule, you have to listen to it. It's not going to be, and I know there are people who are like, well, I'm their parent, and if I say the rule, they should just listen to it. Yes, that's true. But if you want them to understand it and obey it with understanding, you may have to phrase it a little bit differently. The other one is you have to teach them delayed gratification. It is not ingrained in them. You have to teach them that you don't get what you want when you want it. Perfect example, especially with our little kids, the 48-hour rule. Okay, you were in the store, you wanted to spend your money on this. We're going to wait 48 hours, and I'll ask you on Friday, do you still want to do it? We'll go buy it. And most likely what's going to happen? They'll probably change their mind. But that's something they're not going to do naturally. They're not going to go, oh, you know what, let me go home and really think about, do I want this or don't I want this? Intentionally give them times of waiting and make them think about what it would be like. Let's keep going. This one is hard. Sacrifice your current comfort for their long-term success. Say no. So the best example I could think of is you're a young mom, your 3-year-old is in your cart at Walmart, and you have 45 minutes to get your groceries. And you start going along, and your 3-year-old starts doing what? Screaming, crying, whatever. What do you think most people do right then? They reach in their purse, and they hand them a phone. What just happened? Who benefited from that? Did the kid benefit or did the parent? The parent did. Because as a parent, do you want to be the parent walking around Walmart with your 3-year-old screaming? No. But what you just then did was you conditioned your child that when I am upset, I get something to soothe me. And so as parents, as teachers, as grandparents, take a step back and look at what you're doing. Is it about you or is it about them? One of the things that I struggle with sometimes is I have people in my life who They don't like certain foods, and every meal is the things they like. And I have other people in my life whose parents said, you're going to try everything. They will eat anything. Think about it for a second. If you are only giving your kids things they like, what do you think they're going to look like when they're 15, when they're 18? It's hard. I love this example. My mom would make meatloaf. I absolutely hate meatloaf. But I had to eat it because I was part of a family. And I had to sacrifice what I liked for the rest of the family. Just think for a second, if that child sits down and gets everything they like, and mom has to always constantly move around, you are teaching that child life is about them. And that's not easy. And saying no and not giving them what they want is hard. But for their long-term gain, sometimes that's what we have to do. Let them see you make mistakes and deal with them appropriately. If your kids or your students or your grandchildren never see you make mistakes and deal with them, they won't learn to. One of the best things parents can do is say, I'm sorry. Is come back and say, I'm sorry. I lied because I was scared of what would happen. You heard me on the phone. That was wrong. That will do. You don't think like, you think, oh, I don't want to let my kids. That will do more for these young kids, seeing honesty. Or, I don't understand why Jesus isn't answering my prayer, but I'm just going to keep praying and I'm just going to keep trusting. You will build into them that same thought. We'll move on. All right. Another thing you have to do is don't rescue them from tough situations. I can't tell you how many times, and this isn't personally here at the church, but I see people, they don't want to go, so I'm going to let them come home. I was reading a book about a man, and he was saying how when he went to summer camp, he didn't want to go. He got there, and then he didn't want to go. And his dad did such a good thing. He called him, please come get me, please come get me. He said, I will check back with you tomorrow and see if you still want to come home. And gave it and did it the next day and said, he's like, I still want to go. Give me one more day. By the third day, he was having a blast and stayed the rest of the week. Don't always rescue kids from tough situations. My niece Juliet was on a basketball team. She's in 7th grade, and she was on a 7th and 8th grade basketball team. The 8th graders were so cruel to the 7th graders. And my sister-in-law was telling me about that, and she said, so we sat her down, and we just said, sometimes in life, you're going to be in a group where you don't get along. We're going to make it through the season. And it did not get better for her, but she made it through the season. And I look at that and I think, and I applauded my sister. I said, great job. You just taught her, even though it's not fun, you keep going. Because how many of you in your job, you're allowed to just quit because you're not getting along with the people next to you? Is that an adult skill we want them to learn? But you've got to help them. Like, they're just not going to be able to figure out how to do it. They sat down after every practice. How did it go? What did you do? What could you change? And even if they don't change, you keep going. Don't rescue them out of tough situations. Teach them to walk through it. Next one is address technology. I know that Pastor JD and Joel are going to talk a lot more about it, but it really hits the young kids. Screens demand our attention. Screens disciple. The power of digital tools and the content they deliver are incredible. And we are the first generation of humans who cannot rely on the earned wisdom of previous generations to help us live with these rapid technological changes. Instead of older adults and traditions, many young people turn to their friends and algorithms. How many of you could go to your parents who are raising kids with tablets and ask them, what do I do about tablets? You didn't have anyone to give you wisdom on what to do or what not to do. You have to kind of relearn it. And so address technology. If you're sitting next to somebody, I want you to take your finger and I want you to poke them. Do it again. Okay, do it again. Do it again. At what point would you slap the hands of the person who keeps doing this? How many times do you think you'd let them do it? You can attest to my husband. I did this in the car. He's like, stop it. That is what it feels like to a child who has a portable device with notifications on it. Think of it instead of media, instead of technology, think of it if it was a real person. So as parents, as teachers, teach them to turn off notifications. Maybe you're that person. Turn off some of your notifications. Because what it does is, it's very hard for kids to deal with that. And so turn them off. Make a social media contract with your kids. I found a group that had one, and it was a group that I didn't like all of their stuff. So we tweaked it here at the church to make it for parents. And it's just a contract between you and your kids about technology. And so it's a contract, and you come up front with, here's what, if your kid is asking for a phone or asking for a tablet, here's the contract. Now, you may never have done that, but you could sit down with them and say, you know, as a parent, I'm learning. And one of the things is sometimes we don't realize what we need to do, and so I'm going to sit down with you, and we're going to talk about technology. And it talks about, here are the requirements before you get one that I still need to see, and then here are the requirements when you have one. And if you violate this, if this, then this. And then you renew it every so many months. And it talks about what an online friend is, what a real friend is, and it's just a great way to help them think about technology. Do your research. Don't put something on your kid's phone that you have not researched or on their tablet. Do your research. One of the things the kids said, what should I tell the parents when I'm talking about what it's like to be a kid today? Unanimously, from everyone in the room, would you please teach them what video games are? I'm like, okay, what do I need to tell them about a video game? You can't pause online games. And I went, what do you mean by that? Well, you can't. You're playing with 5 other people. You can't pause it. It keeps going. And I went, I never thought about that. I said, so what do I tell your parents? Well, we need like 20 minutes to finish the game. And I said, I will tell them that. So, as parents, this is hard for them. Say to them when they get on a tablet or they get on a game, if you have things that you need them to do or you have to leave in 10 minutes, say it ahead of time. Hey, do you really want to play? Because you've got 10 minutes. At the end of 10 minutes, this is going to stop. Are you ready? And I know there's a part of me that says, well, they should just be able to stop the game and go on. Their brains don't think like that. And so we do have to say, what can I say to a child? How can I prepare them? It even went to one of the little girls going, would you please tell dads that it takes girls in 5th grade longer than 5 minutes to get ready? We're not like them. And I said, okay, so what I'm going to tell dad is if you need 20 minutes, then he's got to tell you 20 minutes before you leave to get up in the morning to be ready. And she went, I guess. But have you ever asked your kids, how long does it take you in the morning? How much time do you need to get ready? Why have it be a fight? Figure it out with them. But don't pause an online game. I've done my job. The next 2 are pretty easy. Promote being outside and doing physical activity. I asked my husband, I said, how did you learn to obey rules and stuff? And he goes, because we weren't bad. We were outside all the time playing. I didn't like disobey rules because we were playing. And I realized what kids have is energy. And when they're sitting, watching something or on a tablet, are they getting out any of that energy? No, they're not. And so then when they put it away, all this energy that they don't have a place for, usually it gets directed at their sibling. Get them outside. Make it so they're outside. Sorry, no tablets this afternoon. It's a beautiful day. Go play. The other thing is physical toys. Giving them actual physical toys that they can do things with. And then lastly, view them with hope and give them hope. These kids are amazing. They have so much inside them that they can give. And they have, like I said, their view of the world, the view of what they can do, and they are taught at 4 and 5 that they can accomplish anything. 2 great examples. This kid on YouTube, Ryan, when he was 8, and I had to write it on there so I would remember the exact number. When he was 7, he started his own YouTube channel showing toys. When he was 7, he made $22 million. $22 million at 7 because of all the advertisers that got on him. You know, and he said to his mom, "Mom, I see other kids on YouTube. Why don't I have a YouTube channel?" He's a child influencer. That's now his title. Imagine what these kids can do. Hopefully more than that. But they have the amazing potential. When we lower the stakes or give kids artificial purpose to engage in, they end up with artificial maturity. Give them problems to solve. Those conversations, maybe you see things that happen, they might have a solution. This young girl, she was 15. Her name is Anna Stawolowski. I can't remember. She was 15. She had an online friend in the Philippines. Found out her online friend was failing some things in school. This little girl is exceptional. She decided she would make a flashlight that is powered by the heat of your hand for her friend in the Philippines. She won Google's something or other, and these things are all over now. You can buy a flashlight that literally is energy comes from the palm of your hand because of a 15-year-old. Don't doubt what is inside these kids. They have amazing, amazing potential. Don't discount it. View them with hope and give them hope. There's nothing better. And I can imagine if that kid at 7 can make $42 whatever million on toys, imagine what could happen to some of these kids in the church when we share vision and we share ways that they can do it. They're an amazing generation, but they need every other generation to help them. Because if we let them go, I'm scared where they'll end up. But I have hope because God gave us an amazing plan. We can mentor them and give them what they need. And I just want to end with this quote. Different life experiences lead generations to dismiss and devalue one another. But the church must be the place we give no quarter to that destructive thinking. We need one another to get on with our mission. We can do it. And God's given us amazing kids that we can help. Questions? I know that was a lot of information. And just from a children's ministry perspective, I'm going to try in the children's ministry to teach them some of the things that I've learned about older generations, because obviously there aren't any kids in this room that we can teach. As we go through the rest of these weeks, we're going to be talking about we can teach them and what they can give us and vice versa. Obviously, we can't do that in the room. But if a kid comes up to you and asks you a question in church, because I'm going to say, hey, if you don't know, go find somebody who's older than you in the church and ask them. Be ready. Questions? Dr. Morsley.
How do you address the parents who already have
You sit down with them and say, as a parent, I gave this to you and I need to reevaluate how we're handling technology. Let's talk about it. There's nothing wrong with a parent going back and saying, maybe I didn't do this right. I've learned some new things. I want to change the way we do things. Because then kids can learn that too. Because her friend said, I'm failing my classes because at night the Filipino girl said, I have no electricity. I can't study. Sorry, I probably didn't give that part too. Glad. Thanks, good question. Other questions? Mm-hmm.
Jenny, apart from the drop-off post-high school, are there any other significant drop-offs in kids leaving church at any other ages before the end of high school? Like the transition, is there any type of drop-off from leaving children's ministry going into student ministry, or are there any ages where we see significant drop-off in kids attendance?
The question is whether there's drop-off. We obviously know there's drop-off when they leave high school and go. Is there drop-off on other parts? There isn't a lot of data on that. And a lot of times I think that is because it's families. When you have younger kids, they're coming to church because you're coming to church. As you slowly get up in the Generation Z and you have your 15, your 16-year-olds, they're still coming with their families. Then it's kind of up to that child. And I think a lot of it really just depends on, do they want to go? And the one thing I can say through all of this, what made me happy was to see that Cornerstone does so many of the things that keep kids coming back, keep Gen Z coming back. And so I love that. Other questions? Mr. Weir?
Put you on the spot. At what age do you think kids should have a phone?
At what age do I think a child should have a phone? I can't give you an age. And there's a part of me that thinks I know, but I really can't give you an age because every child is different. Knowing your children, your oldest probably would be ready sooner than your second daughter. But I think it really is based on your child. Personally, I don't think anybody under middle school needs a phone because it's what it means. You know what I mean?
Define a phone. And I run into this with my parents all the time who are 80. And they get upset the kids are on their phones. It's a screen. You're on a television, right? And your television can't access very many things. So when you say what age should kids have a phone, well, an iPad and a phone are the exact same thing. The only difference is an iPad doesn't make a dial call, there's no FaceTime.
Yeah, and there's
Take a step back and say, what is a phone and why do they say, I need a phone? Because they might most likely already have an iPad.
Right, and I think you have to look at any technology, not just a phone, any form of technology. And so think about that from the older generation is asking you why do they need one. They need to be, I would explain it to them, but then I would also look at why are they asking that question? Are they asking that question because when they're with that older generation, are they on it? And so if that person is saying, oh, why do they need it? Because when they're with me, they're on it, that's kind of a clue to go, wait, let's look at this situation. And maybe it is when you go there explaining they want to spend time with you. And your phone or your tablet keeps you from focusing on them, so let's leave it at home. Because if somebody's asking the question, there's a reason, what can you do to fix that? Or be the bridge between it. And maybe talking to them, why do they need one? Helping them understand. Yes, all of the sessions for this 6 weeks are on our YouTube channel, which is Life at Cornerstone. You could also go to the Children's Ministry website, and under Faith at Home, we'll have links to that YouTube video. Any other questions? Ms. Marissa? So what is next week? Next week is Pastor JD and Joel are going to talk about Gen Z, what it's like to be a teenager. God bless them. Any other questions? All right, let's pray. Yes, please, Pastor Ron.
How many of you know that we are blessed to have Jenny as our children?
Thanks, Pastor Don. All right, let's pray. Lord Jesus, I thank you for your word. I thank you that way before the world began, you knew we'd be standing in this time and this place talking about generations. Lord, and I thank you that you told us to bear with one another and to make every effort to be united in love and in unity. And Jesus, I just pray that we'd be able to do that. Lord, for every person who's here, every person who's going to watch this online, Jesus, I pray, Holy Spirit, that you would just give them wisdom because they interact with kids from Gen Alpha all the time. And so I pray that you would be with them as they do that so that one day these kids will be the older generation and they'll be talking about the kids coming along. Thank you, Lord, for your love and for your grace. In Jesus' name, amen.